Hello everyone, it's Elizabeth from The Smart Stitcher and welcome to this week's video. In this video we are going to be talking about sewing up our fifth finger, which is the last finger that we've got to sew up on our glove. As you can see, I've already got it tacked and I've got my tacking stitches holding the glove together, much the same as we've used elsewhere, but I've also taken them down the outside of the glove, as you can see here, and they're probably sort of 2.5 inches apart, 5 or 6 centimeters apart. But I basically need to make sure that when I start sewing my glove up completely, that my base of my glove is still level, and I also don't then have a problem with the leather shifting as I try and sew up towards the finger as well. So we're going to start very much like we've done with our other fingers, and I'm going to sew the back of the finger first, starting thread in the same way. I'm then going to turn the glove round, I'm going to sew the other underside of the finger, and again we're going to be trimming and shaping. As you can see, the fourchette here is quite large for what we're going to be doing. And then finally, the last seam we will do is the seam that comes up from the base of the glove all the way up to the top of the finger, and we'll overlap in a similar way that we have done previously. So let's get on with it. I've started with my back stitch, and that is a very tiny stitch just here. So I'm starting in exactly the same way that I have done with every other stitch when I'm starting at the top of the fourchette. So I'm sewing along the back of the hand first, and I'm going to come along with that roughly to about the halfway along the finger, and then I'm going to start the underside and sew up the underside of the finger as well, probably to just not quite as much as halfway along the finger, probably about just over a third of the way along, as then I want to make sure that I can get that top of the finger in a really good shape. Now I've started and I have come up the seam that's on the back of the hand, and I've got to just over the halfway point. Because I've tacked the sides together, it can make accessing the final seams a little bit tricky. What I find quite helpful is to go in and just sort of open where my tacking stitch is, so that I can then do my starting stitch on the inside here, and then I can start with my customary back stitch and continue sewing in the same way. So it's just a little tip that actually doing your starting stitch on the inside here can make it a bit more accessible, and then you just carry on sewing as we have done with the previous finger. So I'm now going to be coming up along the underside of the finger. I'm at the point now where I'm ready to start my final thread on this particular glove, and I'm going to be starting it down here so that I then work my way up along the side of the glove. Now you might notice that now it's starting to become a more three-dimensional form. It wants to sort of wrinkle and wants to do its own thing. Don't be worried by that. The time to be worried is if you have very obvious diagonal sort of pulls and stretches. That's often a sign that something has, the tension somewhere is wrong and something hasn't matched up properly. So I'm going to start my thread off, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that, and then we are going to start from here and we're going to go up probably to about halfway up the finger, and then we start having a look at fitting it and finishing it. Now I've started my thread a little bit further up. I've decided that I don't necessarily want to start right at the bottom. I'm just about a couple of centimeters, around about maybe just under an inch up, and I've done my starting stitch and I've done my loop, I've hammered it flat, and I'm now going to come through onto the right hand sort of side of the glove so I can start sewing. So I'm just going to make sure I'm going to come out, and I'm actually going to come out on the back. So I've got my starting stitch just peeping out there on the inside. I've taken my needle out to the back, and I've gone, in effect, I've gone just behind my starting stitch, so that when I start to sew, I sew through the starting stitch and everything is covered up. So I've actually come out on my seam allowance, and I'm now going to start sewing up as we've discussed. I'm right-handed, so I'm working from my right to my left, and I just want to keep going with my pre-stitch, and we're going to start and come, as I mentioned, halfway up the finger. So I've come out, I'm about to go back in. This is where my thread came out, so I'm working from right to left. So to do my back stitch, I've just gone behind my that sort of tail of thread that I've got there, and then I'm going to come out on the front, which you can just about see as I tilt it there. So now I'm just working my way up to halfway along that 5th finger with my pre-stitch. Right, we are almost there. I've come up almost to the sort of halfway points on my little finger, so this is the back of the hand, and if I flip over I can see that I am just under the halfway point on the other side of the hand as well, because I know I'm going to be trimming some of this fourchette off. So the next thing to do is for me to mark the middle of this finger, and we're going to run that fourchette up, keeping with that sort of 10 to 2, 5 to 1 position, so that I can then trim off that excess and finish stitching up this back finger. We're at the point now where I am ready to start thinking about trimming my tip of my finger on the palm side. I've already tried it on, and I've tipped my finger forward slightly so I get the sort of the roll up under the pad, and I've drawn that on, and I'm happy with that. So I'm actually not cutting off that much from the tip of the finger here. Now the tips of the fingers are going to be finished in exactly the same way as we have done with the other ones. I've already sewn up the finger where the top of the fourchette is, and that thread is finished off. I've noticed that I've got a little bit of tension on my side here, and I sort of feel that the tacking stitch is sort of creating a bit of a drag mark, so I'm going to release that in a moment and sew the side of the finger up a little bit more, and then I'm going to basically make sure I've trimmed that before I start sewing it, and then close the finger as we have done previously. Right, we're there. We have finished sewing the left hand glove. The final finger I overlapped these stitches and then finished the thread off in the seam, and then we have got our sort of first part of our prototype now made, and I've been trying it on throughout, because let's face it, that's a good thing about making something for yourself. And I'm now going to use a glove stretcher, which looks a little bit like this. You can get a lot of second-hand ones on eBay, and I'm going to insert that into the fingers, into each finger, and I'm just going to open it, and I hope you can see that is just stretching the finger. So I'm going to go along each finger and do that, and I tend to sort of go across the glove and then along the glove, so you can see I'm sort of squeezing that way and then squeezing that way, so across and along, down through each finger, and then just work your way along. Now bearing in mind this is a prototype, there are going to be things that I want to have a little look at and things that I will change when I do the right hand, and things that I just want to check out. I'm just going to slip it on and show you what that sort of finished glove looks like on. So here we have the finished glove, and for a prototype I'm really pleased with how it's actually turned out and how it looks. Moving forward to sort of making the final one, there are a few things that I want to check when I make the right glove, just to check that I'm right on things, but I'll just talk you through a few things now. So on here, where I have started the glove probably just a couple of centimetres, just under an inch away from the base of the glove, I'd actually probably move that start point up just for ease of getting the glove on and off. And yes, things will be different with a bit of wear and tear, but what I don't want to do is to end up ripping the stitches or making this part of the seam quite vulnerable, so I'll probably move that. The thumb actually is very sort of close fitting, but it does look, judging by the lines across it, that it could need a little bit more room. So on my pattern I'll probably make it a little bit wider, and that might just be an extra ½ centimetre, and that will give me enough to get the right sort of width across the thumb there. As I move my hand I can feel it, it's fitted, but it's not sort of bending and ripping, so that would obviously be a very obvious sign if something was too tight. On the fingers, now I've got a few things that I've kind of noticed as I've stitched them. I'm quite happy with the sort of the shape of the index, the fourth and the fifth finger. I'm not perhaps so happy with the top of this one, so that might be something I look at when I do the right hand side, just to make sure I get the fit better. I also feel I'm quite used to sort of having to accommodate larger hands, but I feel with some of my fourchette pieces I might well have just trimmed them a little bit tighter to the finger. Now the base of my fourchette feels very good, and it feels a nice kind of, there's not much give as I check the base of each finger, but I feel that along my hand there is a little bit of excess kind of floppiness that I'd like to sort of get rid of. They do look a little bit sort of bit heavy, a bit paddly to me. I'm quite pleased with the left hand, with the fifth finger, sorry, and with the index finger. So I'm really looking to sort of trim the fourchette, and I can sort of see as I sort of start to pinch it together that there is a little bit more of an excess there that I perhaps want to get rid of. The final thing that has sort of really got me thinking is the length of the fingers. Now I can feel, just by feeling my sort of index finger and my fifth finger, that I've perhaps got those at the right length. What I am noticing with my fourth and my third fingers is that the base of the fourchettes is sitting a little bit higher than I might otherwise like it, and I can sort of feel that it wouldn't stop me wearing the glove, and not enough to sort of stop me trying it out and testing it, but I'm aware that I feel that this perhaps could be a little bit lower on sort of these sort of 3 fourchettes points here. So the length of the index finger I'm happy with, but what I'm thinking I might well do is to actually make these 2 fingers a little bit longer, and that might just be about ½ centimetre or so longer. That would then have an impact because there'd be more finger to go in the glove up here, and that would then lower the fourchette down. I think it may be slightly more, just from sort of feeling where it is in relation to my hand. I might make it a little bit more than, not as much as a centimetre, but maybe 0.8, and that would then give me a sort of better length in the fingers. I mean, I'm really pleased with how that looks. It feels lovely on. I'm also aware, and I saw it on one of the earlier sort of playbacks of the videos, but I think I've actually inadvertently shortened this by easing the length of the finger down a little bit rather than keeping it straight when I was sewing the fourchette in. So if you can sort of see that there are a few kind of wrinkles, and I'm sort of thinking, well, this finger does feel shorter, but I think what I perhaps need to do is just straighten that out and make sure that I don't get that caught in on the on my right hand side, and I'll test that theory. Now I think we've pretty much covered all of our larger bits and pieces. When I look at adding the length, I may just halve the depth of the finger and add that as the length, because that's perhaps where the sort of the problem has come. So it's not going to be very much, it will be more than ½ centimetre, but it probably won't be more than a centimetre, but I'll look at that on paper and see what we do. Anyway, happy stitching.